actually,
Yeah, everything's ready when we are.
cool.
Oh yeah, fuck yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers. Good morning.
Good morning. I think last week, I remember one of the things we talked about was like, what are some of the big ideas for the pod that are going to be like long-term questions so we seek to answer, or just like topics. Power, where power comes from, I think was my idea for last week. And one of the prompts from this week, the one you wrote down about interchangeability of identity, I think somehow connects to that, because I think that identity and power are tightly related. And that's where I've been coming at. I've been coming at it from that direction. As I've been thinking about that. But
so I'm not totally clear on when you said that last week. You were interested in the roots of power and where it comes from.
Yeah.
As a long-term question and answer, as if we wouldn't be able to answer that immediately.
Yeah, like why do some people have it and others don't?
And I don't know what you mean by power, and I don't know if you're talking about like Illuminati power or what.
Yeah, I guess that's part of the question, is what is meant by that, what is meant by power, because there's different definitions of it. There's formal political power, but then there's the power to move markets.
And why is that like a long-term thing you want to understand?
Because I think that it's...
Why is that more important?
Because I think that it's kind of mysterious. It's kind of a mystery, that it seems like it's kind of like the same kind of mystery as what your first memory is. When you think back in your memory, and if you ask someone, like, try to remember the first thing you ever remembered, people would be like, well, I can't. It's a blurry line where the blocks just start getting sparser and sparser and sparser and sparser and sparser. Think back to when you're 4 years old, and I have an image in my mind of like the time that this happened, and in the memory I'm this big, so I must be young, like 4 years old or something, but I don't really have a clear sense of my life as an episodic whole. There's this blurry, undefined boundary, and
where power comes from and where it began is similarly hard to follow a thread.
Exactly.
That's understandable.
Because you can find the immediate precedent of power by thinking about it for about a second. You can go like, why, and you can see it like in a formal system, like, why does this person have power? Because they were elected. This is how it worked. Well, why were they elected? Well, because people believe this, so they appealed to these group of people. Well, why did, where did that group of people come from? Well, that was the result of historical factors that made these people be in this voting block, and, well, why were the factors that way? So it's like this kind of system where the answer gets more complicated the farther you consider the past, because of the way things tend to connect together and have multiple causes for the same, result. So I think that the roots of power are similarly indistinct, as almost like the roots of identity, because your memory, this is why I was connecting them, is because your identity, one way of looking at it is it's the set of memories that you have congealed. It might not be your whole identity, but it's the identity that you've conceptualized, and it's weird that we start from a blurry boundary, in the same way that we start from our superego identity, which is kind of like where power lives, is similarly indistinct from the beginning, and we can only see the part of it that's close to us. And I just think it'd be fun to explore, try to like come up with some more insight into like why some things percolate to the top and become more compelling than others. Certain symbols or certain people or certain ideas or ethics or something like that.
Identity isn't only that set of memories you have, though, because that set of memories can never successfully predict what you're going to choose now, because there's a huge added ingredient in the identity of you, which is your consistent perspective of an I, the letter I, and the way it feels. That's maybe poetically illustrated by a few memories, the way it feels to be Stuart, and the way things look one way to you in a way that they don't look that way to anyone else. That's identity too. And that's a thing that has no beginning at all except the present moment that you're in right now. And for context for the audience, I was bringing up the interchangeability of identity in today's world because I was watching Code Miko videos and just aghast at the place we are in society where a Twitch thought doesn't even have to be real anymore. They can just be a 3D rendered avatar controlled behind the scenes by a technician.
Thought as in that hoe over there, not thought as in a
Yes.
mental
No.
okay,
No.
all right, play that. Just
Twitch thoughts, THOUGHT, are like almost universally not worth bringing up.
I don't know.
very low level
I
of
just made that
thinking that
connection.
happens.
I've heard the phrase Twitch thought, and I was like, oh, that's like something that like a mode of thought characteristic of being on Twitch. That was like the dictionary definition in my brain, and I realized like I was very, very wrong.
No,
Okay.
Code Miko's a Twitch thought, but like for a new age where she's literally a fucking computer program.
Is that legal? Holy shit.
And people can like control her by, or like get her to do funny things graphically by paying her money.
Congratulations to the person who had that idea and actually implemented it. That's genius.
She's called the technician. She doesn't reveal her real name, but she streams just herself too, apart from her Code Miko performance. So you can like see the technician herself too. And yeah, she wrote the whole, like, she built the whole software thing and how it interacts with Twitch. And presumably she built Code Miko and how she looks and what she wears and made those 3D models. And presumably she made also the code of how people can pay money on the Twitch platform, and then it like changes Code Miko's hair color or her like eye color or what shirt she's wearing. Like she built all that, she wrote all that, and then she gets into a motion capture suit and does the performance.
That's great.
And I'm sure she makes shit tons of money because Twitch thoughts just make a bunch of money, like, period, even when they aren't putting actual talent and competence and originality.
This is an abstract Twitch thought, a meta Twitch thought, the ideal form.
Oh, and I'm contextualizing this interchangeability of identity that seems unique to us now. It's, of course, the Matrix ethos where you can, like, the more VR we go, the more, like, changeable and modifiable your personality is and your identity is. And I was bringing it up as our prompts because we were, turn this up a little, because we were joking about different locales last week because we were in front of a creek just for fun, and then we were joking that we could just put on different outfits for the same effect of keeping things fresh. And then that same day, Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell made an episode where their whole studio is lit by candles, and they put on wizard cloaks and wigs.
That's awesome.
Just to have a weird new space to go into their same Duncan Joe chemistry with.
That's awesome.
And then after that, I saw the Code Miko shit, and saw the technician, and And it's just a whole layer of reactions to even like sit in front of footage of that and like try and understand what the fuck is happening in the moment of watching her interact with people. It's super fucking weird and disjointed.
Yeah, there's like words appearing on her face, presumably things that people have typed in the chat, right? Do you think there's a social commentary aspect? And if so, what is it?
Well, it's mainly novelty. We just haven't seen that before.
I would agree. It's mainly novelty.
Mainly novelty.
Yeah.
And even Twitch thoughts are mainly novelty. A girl playing a video game is a novel thing, so that's going to get a lot of traffic,
Right.
just off the get-go. And just watching people play video games as a mode of entertainment is novel too. So like Code Miko is like a coalescing of a lot of novel, brand new things that people are just freshly excited in. So very little commentary there besides new things.
So could you reduce that to the phrase integration of novelty?
Application of our new novel technologies in new ways.
Yeah, an integration into a distinct thing that has a name and can be recognized and kind of contains expressions of various things that are yet to be well defined or well understood.
And it's, of course, related to all the trans fervor and all the all the LGBTQ plus times a million culture.
Because that itself represents a kind of interchangeability of identity.
It's this, you are whoever you want to be. You could feel a different way tomorrow, and culture's going to empower that and say, you say you're a totally different gender tomorrow than you were yesterday. Yes, we're going to approve of that.
Okay, I'm trying to think
that's valid.
I'm trying to think about this in financial terms. So imagine that personal identity, and that I suppose this is larger than LGBT stuff. It's more, I mean, like, just identity in the postmodern age, that kind of thing. I wonder if there's an analogy to be made to liquidity in a market where in times of stress, in times of change, the amount of liquidity that is kind of like the optimum amount increases. So because of the fact that it needs to be able to allocate itself efficiently, and it's characterized by efficiency and instability for a time, and that's why.
What is a given financial boom?
Yeah, like if there's changing conditions, that increases the relative importance of maintaining liquidity, and I think that could be like a cultural adaptation. That we have like a visceral knee-jerk response as a culture to changing times by loosening the bounds of identity and allowing it to flow more freely between people, which results in a kind of action. It's a kind of like it's kind of de-integration, and it's like a de-integration pending reintegration, and it's a cycle where because of the kind of like how if you're like, if you're digging a tunnel through rock or something, you have to like fracture the rock so that you can move it out of the way so you can get to other rock. And it's like, I think it's like something like that where like we're, as a group of people, kind of trying to go into the future by kind of like this, a lot of people I think feel have an unconscious ethos towards anti-rigidity because rigidity tends to
Well, people
break.
are trying to articulate the mode of life that best fits with their felt experience.
Yeah.
So the interchangeability of identity that a lot of people are finding themselves attracted to is attractive because it resonates with how they feel. People are having the experience of being very different from 1 month to another, from 1 year to another.
Yeah.
And they are glad to embrace a cultural assumption that a person can change.
Yeah.
And doesn't have to be the same thing forever. And the most obvious example of that in my spheres is gender. A lot of people agree in my circles that none of us really feel all the way masculine. None of us really feel all the way feminine. It's a spectrum. It's like, definitely in like California, it's like almost a more rare thing for a young millennial or Gen Zer to be like really firmly in the male or female thing and how they feel about themselves.
I agree. Yeah. I think, I think it's just, in some ways, it's just not talked about. I mean, there's obviously, it's kind of like a hobby thing, I think. Kind of like gender psychology is a kind of, it's really the definition. It's pop psychology in the most generous use of the term. Because, pop psychology is, people, which I think is like, it's a testament to how much misplaced trust we have in institutions that pop psychology is a pejorative. So I'll just say that to begin with. I don't mean this as a pejorative. I think that gender psychology is perhaps the best example of like popular reckoning with the psychological makeup of humans. And it is kind of subsequently been imported into, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual 4 of the American Psychological Association, which now recognizes that homosexuality is not a mental disorder, despite claiming that from the years forever up until 1996 or whatever it was, or maybe it was even later than that. But there's a kind of latency between cultural consensus and institutional consensus that sometimes goes one way and sometimes it goes the other. Sometimes it takes a while for the general public to catch on to some new thing, and there's like popular myths that persevere, like the whole right brain, left brain hemisphere. That's an idea that came out of neuroscience, but it's something that people latched onto because it was simple and tractable, but then, held onto for much longer than the scientific consensus did. But, with gender and identity in general, like, that is very much a popular phenomenon, and as such, trying to apply the lens of institutional scientific certainty and responsibility and stuff like that to it is just kind of misplaced application, I think, of, it's not science, it's culture.
But
which honestly comes before science, in my opinion.
But what about this set of phenomena is related to your questions of power? You were trying to like apply a kind of plasticity to financial institutions.
Yeah, because I was kind of thinking about this in terms of like, so like NFTs, non-fungible tokens, they're distinct from fungible tokens, fungibility being the property of sameness compared to other units of the same thing. So like $1 is fungible because $1 is $1. A piece of art is not fungible because even though they're both pieces of art, they're distinctly different. Right. So I think when it comes down to it, in reality, despite the number of non-fungible tokens that are being minted by the thousands each minute, in reality, the only token that is non-fungible in reality is one's identity.
Okay.
And this is my model that I'm playing with, because one can imagine that Jack Dorsey goes, that was fun. I got $25 million for a tweet. I'm going to sell another one. How much is he going to get for the second one? Maybe he'll get 25 million. Okay, he's going to sell a third and a fourth and a fifth, and pretty soon he's sold 1,000. The amount per tweet that he gets is going to steadily decline as the number increases. So that implies a kind of finite resource that, called Jack Dorsey, that is truly the non-fungible entity that is now being mapped onto the price of these fungible representations of himself. They're virtual constructs that have been delegated some of the identity that is contained within him, and the process of delegation looks an awful lot like power. So I almost think that the ability to infuse something else with one's own identity is like the mechanism. It's like, I think actually the founder of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin, had an essay about this, that credibility is the only scarce resource. And of course, credibility is linked to one's identity because, or sometimes it's linked to institutions, but that's falling apart. So it's kind of settling on a point where it's going to hit. It's the bottom. This is going to land on. The credibility of various like sources of information and everything is obviously plummeting. Trust is plummeting in the media.
But people are building credibility on their individual bases all over the place.
And so credible individuals are going to be the net that catches our culture and arrests its freefall.
Well, it already is.
Yes.
Joe Rogan's already caught a huge subset of people.
He was an early adopter of this credibility infrastructure.
And given them a sense-making apparatus that they were needing to view the new challenges of the world through. And he's got a kind of power. There's political power, and then there's Joe Rogan power. And he's got more power than Biden, you could argue.
Him and a lot of other people. There's many individuals in the world who have a following that isn't implemented in the formal political machinery.
And there's power of weapons, but then there's the deeper power of the innovative engineering expertise that allows you to invent a weapon.
Yeah, that's kind of, it's almost kind of like personal versus impersonal power. I think it's important to make that distinction because, one could imagine the lone madman who gets a hold of radioactive materials and creates a nuclear bomb and thereby single-handedly ends the lives of millions of others. Like, okay, that's power in a sense that, of course you made a decision, but really it's not really the power I'm talking about. This is power as defined by social consensus, not outcome. You can get lucky. An asteroid could hit the Earth and fuck us all up, and there's nothing we can do. That's not really power. I don't think that kind of power can be compared to identity. Really, doesn't make any sense. It's just, I don't know. I just think it's interesting how it's just like there's a merging of the social and financial spheres. And the interface between them is quite fascinating, and it is exactly where someone like CodeMiko exists. They're exploiting gradients in the interface between social and financial systems. Because, as you said, you can pay money, change the hair color. Aside from enriching the person who made it, which is its primary function, I think that there's another function which is just actually almost like the more deeper aspect of money in the virtual world, which is just the ability to rate limit.
Rate limit?
Mm-hmm. To stop, to somehow introduce a scarce quantity that is linked to the amount of data that you can create per time. So, like, if you're, you can imagine, like CodeMiko, they exist. There's a million people who are trying to change the hair color at once. So the hair color is never going to be a color. It's going to be a constantly flashing, changing thing that's never going to be satisfying because no one can ever really get their decision. It kind of gets defeated by just the scale. But, if you introduce a price, it rate limits the ability for people to do that, and you can create coherence out of. It's a way of kind of just modulating a social structure so that it can interface with another structure, without overwhelming it. It's interesting how, because Bitcoin originally actually was developed as an anti-spam measure. A proof-of-work algorithm was a way to prevent people from sending too many emails. And that was its original incarnation. And it went dormant for a long time. And that idea was resurrected in the form of money, because it turns out the ability to limit spam and money function the same way. And it's almost like, so if an anti-spam measure accidentally became money, is it really that surprising that money became an anti-spam measure? They're the same function. And that's what I see going on with probably the way that social platforms are going to evolve, is they're just going to charge money as a way of limiting bad actors, which is not the worst strategy.
I see, yeah.
And if it frees us from ads, I'm okay with it, because evolution is a series of trade-offs.
It certainly is going to make social media a much more intentional activity.
Yes. Yeah. Less shit posting.
Yeah.
Totally. Dude.
Because I'm not totally clear on how I'm going to line that shit up now.
Yeah.
But I'm certainly going to line the rest of it up the way I fucking want to.
That's a good call.
I'm not going to tank the whole runtime based on my ability to
fudge things,
to rescue that first 40 minutes or not.
That's a good idea.
So are you optimistic for the future of society?
Yes, because of this basic idea of reversion to the mean. Like, in the short term, I think that things are going to get a bit better, because, which sounds like a strange thing to say, but I think that we're probably just going to have an emphasis on just kind of like laying off the uppers a little bit.
The uppers being?
The kind of media that makes you lose your breath.
Oh, sure. That's reaching a very immediate, upper limit of tolerance in the population. Yes. Increasingly.
Yes.
And 2020 pushed people's reliance on the fear porn news to such a degree that now there's this big reaction away from that kind of content consumption.
It's really stale.
I have an aversion to, you said, in the short term things are going to get better in this way, and that's strange to say, and I have an aversion to this foregone assumption that things are so bad and getting worse. And it certainly shows up in almost every salon we do, to the extent that we have left-leaning individuals at the salon. It's this clear worldview of a world dying and burning.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's accurate to the situation we're in. I think things are going really fucking good. And there's basically more peacetime between individuals and between nations than has ever been achieved before. There's more people being fed and housed than has ever been achieved before. These are humanitarian achievements on a scale that wasn't even fucking imaginable 100 years ago. Things are going pretty good. And I'm optimistic about the mutually assured destruction of nukes. I think that's a prerequisite to peacetime.
I mean, there's certainly evidence for that.
Yeah, we're living in the evidence
We
of
still
that.
exist. That's the
Yes.
evidence of that. Yeah.
And Dune posits a world that can only grow exponentially into the galaxy by instantiating mutually assured destruction at that scaled up point over again.
Because
every planet has nukes, and everyone agrees to nuke the first aggressor to use nukes.
that's one way to create a stable system.
So in Dune's projection of a future society that can support an infinite number of planets and an infinite number of populations, he thinks mutually assured destruction is still like one of the things at the first layer of code to make that possible.
That, oh my God, that form of mutually assured destruction, that's basically a proof of stake consensus mechanism, where if you disagree with the majority or you're the first to disagree, you lose. And so it creates a kind of a stability where you can't lie or cheat or do anything otherwise unexpected, because if you do, there's a high price to pay, and it's difficult to coordinate. There's a huge risk in coordinating bad faith action with other people because you never know if they're lying or not. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a interesting idea that...
Yeah, you can count on someone's like will to life and will to thrive.
Yeah.
And you can depend on that.
Yeah.
And like know that they're acting for their own benefit and predict for that.
What else are you going to rely on?
I know. Fucking exactly.
What else do you really trust about people other than the fact that they're selfish?
Exactly. That's why we should really be more honest about it.
We should be more honest, dude. I agree. It's a kind of honesty with regard to the human condition. But the thing is, it doesn't have to be a depressing thing. It's just an honest thing. It's like, well, yes, how in the world would we even exist if we didn't care about ourselves? So caring about ourselves is a pretty safe assumption about what all humans have in common. Yeah, I think there's maybe a kind of like inability to admit that breeds hypocrisy, where people pretend not to care about themselves and they project their caring about themselves onto caring about other things, which are really just a disguised mechanism by which they care about themselves, whether they even know it or not.
Yeah, it's inefficient. It just puts more layers of distortion between you and the person you're trying to make an arrangement with.
I think it's the reason why back in the day, the Puritans, not just historical Puritans, but Puritans in a larger sense, people who believe they have the right answer for others. The inquisitors, the evangelists, throughout various times, they haven't really been nice people. Like, we're burning witches, we're invading civilizations, we're spreading smallpox around the world, we're plundering gold, but we're doing the Lord's work and rooting out heresy among us. So it's like a way of transposing your moral frame onto something that you made up, which conveniently aligns with you being the hero. Of course, the people who kind of got fucked up by that were sort of paid the price because the moral frame no longer recognized, the basic welfare of individuals as kind of the thing you should probably focus on when you're designing consensus mechanisms. Consensus mechanisms should really optimize for things that people have in common, self-preservation and self-interest being primary. It goes without saying.
I'm totally jumping now, and I want to talk about Eric Weinstein.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I booted up a Clubhouse rip on YouTube of like 3 hours of Eric talking.
Nice.
With the general heading of him being interviewed about how he feels about Brett getting censored.
Oh yeah.
And are you aware of that this last couple weeks?
Yeah, it was a conversation with a couple PhDs and MDs
To get the info out about ivermectin.
Yeah, I
and
heard about
its
this.
efficacy as a treatment for COVID.
Yeah.
And the proofs for it in terms of countries that have been giving ivermectin en masse to their population.
Yeah.
And they've been way better off in terms of whether they die from COVID or even like suffer from COVID for very long.
Right.
And so those videos are getting directly taken down off YouTube because they're getting flagged as fake news and misinformation.
Right.
So that's some pretty direct corruption and
Yeah.
YouTube getting in the way of the truth, and specifically the truth as regarding like the most pressing health issue of recent history.
Yep, because we all know that the programmer bros
Know
know a
best.
lot better than the scientists.
Yeah, about health and medicine. And so Eric was getting interviewed with that, and in the course of him talking, he mentioned that he hasn't dropped a Portal episode since Biden got elected. And he's fully convinced that if he says what he thinks, people are gonna come for him and shut him down. He's fully convinced that if he says how he feels about all these things, they're gonna come for him.
It's kind of scary.
And why did I bring that up? I guess I just maybe I seriously considered that as an actual possibility for the first time, instead of just rolling my eyes at Eric Weinstein the way I usually do when he says really extreme things. It's not that big of a fucking deal, dude.
I know.
We all want the Portal. Just make more podcasts, please.
I know.
Everyone wants it. Stop being a fucking pussy. And so I was finally well, no one is even in charge of censoring Brett when he's saying literally probably the most important thing that's been said all year, and he's getting censored. So maybe it is a more serious situation.
I look at it like this, let's say that you had a podcaster.
And he doesn't want to be a martyr. He has that attitude that you have too about it. He's convinced he's going to be a martyr if he sticks his head out. Right. And I'm just way more optimistic and think the world would be on your side in that. Yes.
I guess it goes on which level you want to engage. Do you want to engage on the level of rhetoric, or do you want to engage on the level of systems of rhetoric? And I think both probably would be ideal, but I would rather build out the infrastructure of systems to support rhetoric before I deployed it.
And then this is into our prompt of how we directionize free speech personally.
Yes.
Because what do? We're both doing this to learn how to talk and to openly be able to discuss things like Black Lives Matter when George Floyd was happening last year.
Yeah, not
openly be able to entertain things that we're not supposed to think freely about.
Right. Yeah, just for myself, just kind of create a kind of space where some thoughts might be, just where some integration of thoughts can occur, rather than just just staying on the surface of things and never getting anywhere.
We haven't really taken our speech in any dangerous directions.
Oh, I think we have.
Not in 3 months.
Not in 3 months. That's true. That's true.
I'll take it there right now on my own and
Okay.
say that I think the Black Lives Matter riots were totally overblown and much more destructive than they were helpful.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who see that, and probably I think honestly a lot of people on the left too, people who have kind of been painted with the broad brush as like you either support this or you don't, kind of have a more nuanced opinion where like maybe they share.
But they don't say it out loud.
Well, yeah, because it's hard for anyone to say anything out loud, and I think it's honestly to the detriment of what a lot of people who would probably agree with the stated goals also think. Like, I bet there's probably a large segment of people who want to fix the problem of police brutality, but who think that defund the police is probably not the best mechanism to do that. I kind of count myself among those people. Like, for instance, I think that defunding the police is probably just going to result in even lower paid and less qualified police officers, which is going to cause
we've
more
already
violence.
seen that in a lot of cities.
Yeah, and so like it's not a practical solution. It's almost like it seems like it's designed to sabotage something so that people can feel like they've done something when they haven't, which would kind of be par for the course. Because, look around, like, have the police been defunded? No. What's happened? Very little. So maybe that has to do with the ineffectual way that the conversation following the crisis was steered by the mainstream media. And I don't know, I think
the whole thing was just completely dishonest on the part of the protesters. They were unwilling to admit that they were rioting against quarantine just as much as they were rioting on behalf of people they felt were disenfranchised.
Yeah.
And so it was a completely dishonest set of outrage statements, as no one was admitting that they felt like lockdowns were complete bullshit.
Dude, 2020 was that was like an overdose trip, dude. That was like...
Yeah, it occurs to me sometimes that happened.
Yes.
And I have no idea what to do. What
just happened?
I'm so dissociated from it.
Same.
And numb.
Same, dude.
I think. Numb to it. The way a pregnant person will give birth and then their body is built to make them forget the memory of the pain of childbirth.
Oh, really? Wow.
Their bodies program them to forget that so that they'll have more kids again.
Evolution, you clever bastard. That's true.
So I think I've already blanked out what happened in 2020. But more importantly, or more relevantly, I was just bringing up my opinion on the riots of Black Lives Matter in 2020 as a more dangerous realm of speech I ventured into on the pod.
Yeah.
And but that's not necessarily where I plan and want to directionize our free speech.
Me neither.
We generally want to make sure we're flexing the muscle so that we are prepared for moments where it's harder to say the truth, but more important to do it. And so if we've been flexing that muscle, we'll be able to speak from an authentic place when the pressure's on. But I'm feeling the desire for planning and directionizing and creation, a creative product. Where do we want to go with our speech? With the amount of free thinking we have available to us this year.
Yeah.
Because just free speech for its own sake, that's cool, but it doesn't. It could accomplish something real.
Yeah.
Instead of just being a jester about it.
Yeah,
because neither of us are comedians.
No.
At least not on the front end.
I think most people can get into a certain state of mind where they talk like a comedian. Some people can. I feel like I can slip into that mode sometimes. I can't summon that mode on demand. Before I go into that, that's a really good point. I just wanted one little tangent that reminded me of was yesterday I was watching this old clip of Morgan Freeman, and he's being interviewed by, this was like from like 2000 and like, it was like a few years ago. The interviewer, I think he was like from, it was like NPR, like one of those very like neutral mainstream interview shows. And they're asking him, Morgan Freeman had said something like he doesn't like Black History Month. And so they're like, he's like, so they ask him, they're like, why don't you like Black History Month? And I'm not going to do a Morgan Freeman voice, even though I could. He said basically that.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. I don't want to like confuse the message here with my impersonation. He said basically that.
See, Michael Malice would gladly confuse the message.
Oh, I'm not Michael Malice.
In favor of a bit.
No, I think this is a very important thing he had to say, which was that he basically said, paraphrasing, that he's like, Black History Month is American history. Black history is American history. That was the money quote. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. Somehow that resonated with me. Like, I want to see you as an American. Yeah. First.
Me too, dude.
It doesn't mean that I'm not gonna I'm not in the standard refrain or whatever, or like the standard retort to this is like, well, you're minimizing Black people's identity and stuff, and you're whitewashing, and you're trying, it's blah blah blah. But like, okay, I see what you're saying, but both things are true at the same time. I think you can I think there is a certain utility to living in a republic where equality is formally and explicitly defined, and a cultural sensibility that emphasizes the fact that there's a ground level of unity that sponsors your ability to have different identities. Because if you don't have...
And the American is a character trait
that
like literally anyone on the planet can adopt.
It is.
It's the most inclusive, like, stereotypical character trait. Like, the difference between a Black person who's just trying to act like a stereotypical Black person and talk the way Black people talk and dress the way Black people dress, and then there's just a person that happens to be Black, that is just trying to be a person and make their own judgments about the world. And they seem more like offhand, because I like project myself onto everyone. They seem like a derogatory term for it is whitewashed.
Yeah.
Like a whitewashed Asian.
Right.
Or a whitewashed Black person.
Right.
But that's really like the character trait of being American.
Yeah.
Like it comes with assumptions
we're
speaking English.
We're American washed.
Being American washed.
Yeah, we are American washed.
Like,
that is true.
There's like gay people who are overtly trying to publish the fact that they're gay with every word they say and with every piece of clothing they put on. But then there's like more American washed gay people who like, that's such a small part of what they need you to know about them is whether they're gay or not. They're just trying to have a hangout and talk with you and be a person in front of another person.
I walked into Starbucks yesterday, and there was a giant pride flag hanging in the window. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, Pride Month, all right. And then I kind of just thought, I was like, I wonder if you're doing more, like, what's the net effect of that? Are you doing, because like, you're not taking any risk with that. If Starbucks did that,
so it's not a powerful statement at all. Because there's no risk.
I would say it's in the red. It's below neutral. It's slightly counterproductive because it's like,
I agree.
It's just like, it's trivializing it. Because if it was 20 years ago, it'd be like, wow, yeah, Starbucks is going to alienate a lot of customers. That's brave choice. You've advanced acceptance of something. But now it's like, Starbucks knows that they're not going to alienate. They're going to, it's a calculated decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's
based
like,
on a profit motive.
So it's like the bottom line of some company that's just fundamentally an amoral thermodynamic entity whose prerogatives include acquiring capital.
Pretending to be moral.
And it trivializes it, and like, I can't help but thinking maybe the same thing. Maybe that's what Morgan Freeman was getting at, and he's saying, maybe we're kind of trivializing our political identity at our own peril by de-emphasizing its importance, and kind of like, so I think what I would like to do with free speech is like use it more as like use it more as like it's just like a prophylactic.
What's a prophylactic? That's
Something-
like an old person medicine. Is it?
It's grandpa's cough medicine. No, it's like
Prophylax.
prophylax. Are you having problems? Are you stopped up? Prophylax. Order now. Yeah.
Old man and old woman walking in the park, smiling,
Okay.
holding hands.
Yeah.
Prophylax.
And then there's like cuts to like thing where it's like,
Side effects include death.
yeah, exactly, like
And shit,
Just like-
shitting yourself to death.
like a solid 40 seconds of compressed speech that are just like side effects include death, and then it goes ding, and it goes to the next one, and you go back to your regularly scheduled programming. No, so
Okay, free speech as a prophylactic.
yeah, prophylactic is like
is the way you want to
something
use it.
you take as a prevent, like just to make yourself healthy in the absence of a specific malady, to boost your overall, like, you know, like some people think that like drinking a cup of tea is a prophylactic, just keep you healthy, or going for a walk is a prophylactic, or
Like regular mild psychedelic trips
Yeah.
should eventually be seen as a prophylactic.
yes, exactly,
in
right,
my opinion.
exactly. So to maintain your, you know, emotional stability and depth
And your
Awareness,
elasticity of
elasticity.
personality and
Yes.
your adaptability
Exactly.
as a person.
Right. So I think that that's kind of like what free speech can do. I think that's the best way to use it, is to be like, come at it from...
It promotes long-term
Right.
adaptability.
Yeah, just like using free speech in a way that makes people feel more open to say what they really think, by signaling that you're not going to fucking murder them if they say something. And it's just a pragmatic thing. It doesn't mean, listening to someone does not mean that you agree with them. That makes me think of something that actually, well, Ron Paul said one time. This is going way back in the archives, but when Ron Paul 08 was a thing, there was like this clip where it was all of the Republican candidates in 2008, and they were like jockeying to be the most tough on crime. And so there was like some primary debate or something where the moderator was like, you know, raised the question of decriminalization of drugs.
Okay.
And of course there was a parade of people going, you know,
Everyone was piling over each other to profess their
how tough they were going to be. And
how tough they were going to be
protecting
on
the
drugs.
children and all this stuff like that, yeah. And like, Ron Paul's like, he said something like, you know, like in his typical like kooky uncle style. He's like, if heroin was legal, are you gonna go out and do heroin? How many people here are gonna go do heroin? And people are like, no one raised their hand. Like, so that was like how he led off. But then the conversation, he had one particular, the way he phrased it, he said, tolerance does not imply endorsement.
Okay.
And I was like, that's like, God, what a great principle.
And that's an American principle.
It is an American principle, and it's also just like a principle of
Tolerances.
It's a
rather.
principle of a republic, of a non-monarchical structure. If you, monarchical hierarchical structures do not have to contend with tolerance; they're more interested in consistency. Republics, on the other hand, are less stable, more resilient, because they're more tolerant and they're more adaptable. And if there's anything that we really need nowadays, it's a republic of the mind, not an empire of the mind or a monarchy of the mind or various feuding kingdoms of the mind, which is kind of what we have right now because we're in a transitional feudal stage. But yeah, I think that it's just kind of using free speech to underline a basic, to create space where people can like legitimately understand what they're trying to say. I don't understand how someone could be against that. And I'm not even arguing against, I'm not even like accusing anyone of anything with this. I'm just saying that I think that we have it's really just a dysfunctional media environment because, you know, our rhetorical structures are being forced into the shape of our economic structures, where people are rewarded for appealing to echo chambers because, you pretty much just have to figure out what everyone believes, figure out what a group of people believes, and push the right buttons, and you take into yourself some of the power of those people. So it's kind of predatory relationship where you just have a bunch of Machiavellian individuals circling around like sharks looking for, groups of peaceful sitting ducks up on the surface, like, and then just like, and like consuming their flesh and using it to like enlarge their power. Like, how is that not happening? Of course it is. I just think the ducks need to become more wily, and they need to become more okay with not clustering themselves in vulnerable little groups, because it creates a kind of global vulnerability. The more divided society it is, the more easy it is for, the proverbial Sith master to just like play chess with people.
So would you say, is there any realm of your thought or the ways you're thinking lately that is dangerous? What realm of the way you think is dangerous right now?
I don't know. It's hard to have perspective on that because I'm not sure what other people's. It's hard to see yourself from other people's perspective for me. The first answer I come up with is all the pride flags, all the pride buttons, all the rainbow everything leaves a really bad taste in my mouth and makes me think, okay, that person is not an individual. That person is just another sheep expressing a value that's so packaged and so loaded that it's not an actual expression of their individual values at all. It's just signaling membership to a group. And any signaling of membership to a group is super distasteful to me. And it's dangerous to say that you don't like rainbow flags, but it's comfortable for me to think that in my own mind because it's such a foregone conclusion acted on and taken for granted in my life for fucking years that I give no shits about what people do with their sex, with other people who are consenting to play sex games with them. Yeah.
Like I've never given more than like 5 minutes thought to that.
Yeah.
Like vaguely like curious when I see a new sexual thing happening when I'm like 10.
Yeah.
There's a girl and she's deciding to like girls and make some kind of like social statement out of it.
Yeah.
Like, that's new. Anyway, back to my video games.
Right. Yeah, children are not naturally homophobic. They learn that from society. I certainly did when I was a kid. I got a great download of conservative religion that just made me like have a lot of thoughts that were not mine. And then when I became like a teenager and thought for myself, I was like, that was like one of the first things that I was like, oh, there's different ways of looking at the world. So I think I'm in the same boat as you. I guess I just don't think it's that dangerous. Like, I don't think it's that dangerous to say what you just said, because I think that's such a sensible opinion that like the trivialization, commodification of social movements is like, anyone who's really paying attention understands that. It's just that we're given, I think that like the way the media caricatures people doesn't give them enough credit, and it makes us all think that other people are so stupid that they don't understand things, and that we have to be afraid of being misinterpreted by, no, we're really, really, really have this image of each other as incapable of having conversations, and it's, at our own peril, because that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then elevates the voices of people who are willing to play into that for their own power.
Okay, so now a slightly more dangerous thought I have is the sympathy I have for European conservatives who wish their countries had stronger borders in the face of the waves of refugees and in the face of the vast percentage of those refugees being of Muslim faith and having very misogynistic values that they're carrying in large numbers into liberal countries. And you're seeing huge upticks in sexual violence and rape correlated with huge influxes of refugee populations. And it's not allowed to be a news item unless you're willing to be a Republican and a martyr and talk about it openly.
Right. What do you think is the, I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying. What do you think is the benefit of talking about that?
If women are getting fucking raped by non-citizens of a country, and if women are not feeling safe in a free nation to go outside their doors anymore and walk through their towns when they did feel safe 10 years before, why wouldn't you talk about that?
Because I wonder how much of the immigration thing is kind of like a foregone conclusion, where in order to address that problem, you'd have to address the reason why there was massive waves of refugees coming into like Europe, for example, which of course
and then that's directly related to
U.S. foreign policy.
To U.S. foreign policy,
yes.
Being willing to destabilize nations
yes.
For nefarious purposes of controlling the oil.
Yes. So I agree with what you're saying. I think that there's a tremendous amount of women's rights have not really been a thing in history, at least recent history that I'm aware of. You know what? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I suspect there was probably a lot of societies in the past that did achieve like egalitarianism, and because they had a resilient, integrated culture. Like, I really don't know. I'm not an anthropologist, but
it's relatively new.
Relatively new, at least in the context we conceive of it. And I think that there's a natural progression where societies kind of just have to go at their own pace. There's no way that we can change a culture, and if we did, it would probably create a backlash that would be even more violent than what we see. It's difficult to separate the trauma of war from just the baseline trauma that restrictive conservative religions do to a population. The kind of like forcing of the human spirit into various molds and roles and stuff like that.
I'm going to say war trauma is a bit worse than being repressed by tradition from your parents.
I think so too. Yeah, and that's the factor. It's difficult to separate those two things. And I just think that, maybe there's a certain kind of like, well, we just have to deal with this now. We had this wave of people, and it's, as is often the case, reality is much more complex than, there's 10 different things happening at once, and I don't know, I'm a big fan of just like root cause solutions, even if they take longer, because I wonder how much, it just feels to me that there's like zero room to effectually discuss like hot button social issues like that. I just wonder how much good it does, I mean, it's worth having a conversation about, but like, how are you going to translate, Muslim refugees are raping women into public policy without going, close the border?
Just talk about how immigration happens in different countries and seeing where it works. I certainly think we have a lottery system at the moment here, and that's fucking stupid as fuck. I think a merit-based immigration system would be way better.
A lot of countries do that, like New Zealand, Australia, Canada. All those countries have merit-based systems, much more so than the U.S.
And I also have a much more selfish view in terms of border control, like that plays itself out in my attitudes about Chico. I don't recognize that Chico as a community has any responsibility for hordes of homeless people moving to California from the entire country to California, and now it's our responsibility to take care of them. at the expense of Chico being a healthy and safe place to live. Like, no. Chico being safe and healthy for my kids is way more fucking important than helping homeless people.
It's a false dichotomy. You can do both.
There's a way to do both that requires strong lines in the sand that are enforced. That's got to be a starting point. Like, if you're not a healthy community, you can't help anybody.
You know, I think that this has a parallel with the foreign policy thing, actually, where you have a much more difficult to solve problem at the root of this, namely the housing crisis, and the fact that homes are investment vehicles, which incentivizes people who own a home as their major investment to oppose the construction of new homes so as to not devalue their investment, and the fact that not only individual homeowners but like funds which sort of bundle this debt, they wield a lot of political influence in terms of like appropriating erstwhile progressive activists to promote an anti-housing agenda. And it plays out in the Bay Area. I was just reading about this, where there's this kind of like intractability to the problem that's kind of like rooted in economics, but plays out as a social hot button issue. And I think that like I would just want to see people who come together to talk about the homeless problem, kind of like bilaterally disarm their sense of moral conviction as kind of like a what's the word I'm looking for? Precondition for engaging in discussion about that issue. Because otherwise it literally makes it worse. Because then you end up with two polarized camps where you go, it's like you value this or you value that. I'm not caricaturing your argument. I'm not attempting to. I'm thinking more like just like the various, the identities that are built around, like in Chico, local politics is probably the number one issue is this pro or anti-homeless thing. And I don't know. It sounds weird to be pro-homeless. And it also sounds weird to be anti, like both of them are not great. Because like when you really dig into it, is like, everyone should be anti-homeless in the sense that you wish this wasn't happening. It's just a question of what do you do about it. And that's a practical question that contains trade-offs. And it's difficult to solve because of the fact that we can't have new houses. And like if we solve that, I think a lot of these other issues would resolve themselves. Like you have a big knotted bunch of rope and you're like, I can't fucking untie this thing. It's been like stuffed in a drawer and you're trying to untie it. And then you go to the Gordian knot at the center, you fix that, and then all the other rope goes like, this is all free now. And I think it's like something like that. A lot of issues are that way.
One knot at the center is a foregone assumption that we have a responsibility to people based on their inability to function.
I would say that's a secondary knot, actually.
And what's below that?
The fact that we have to, we have a scarcity of...
Look at this squirrel. What is it holding in its mouth? It's got some huge fucking piece of wood or something that's just carrying in its mouth. It's fucking huge. Now he's like digging in it, looking for something to munch on.
I think he's using it to build a nest, maybe. Or no, I think the nest building time is over.
It's like a big hunk of what? It's like a squirrel corn on the cob.
Oh, you know what it is? It's a cone. It's like some kind of pine cone or something.
He's mowing down on this thing in front of us right now. He's like pulling it like stringy like meat.
Speaking of squirrels solve their own housing crisis. They just build a house.
So what was underneath the issue of whether we owe weak people some of our strength for them being weak? What's under that?
The fact that we have a scarcity of basic necessities. Despite having like magnificent technology, we have a scarcity of basic necessities.
Do we?
Housing, certainly.
I know there's shit tons of money being thrown at the umbrella issue of homeless people. Like, there's hella money, there's hella food.
And it's not doing a lot of good.
And it's not doing anything.
Exactly.
And then housing, like, scarcity of housing, but then building low-income housing just degrades the value of the city and just makes everything worse. It makes things ugly, and people who make the most money and give the most to the community leave that community because it's an ugly community now.
Yeah, and also because of the scarcity of building permits, developers are incentivized to only build high-income housing unless they're legislatively compelled to do otherwise. And that's a huge issue. So, like, if you didn't have the barriers in place that made it easy and profitable to create
affordable
houses, like the kind of houses that...
Is there red tape in the way of developing affordable, beautiful homes?
There is a goddamn jungle of red tape. And it is primarily due to the scarcity of appropriately zoned areas.
And zoning itself seems like such a...
It's so stupid.
Bullshit
it's
can
such
of worms.
Bullshit.
That's
it's a can of worms.
Just like making things worse.
It's making things terrible. And it's this top-down imposition of a vision for how a city should be that is spiritually impoverished compared to the kind of rich urban environment.
Totally inflexible.
Completely inflexible.
To like actual evidence of if a given idea worked that decade or not.
Yes. Yeah, and so what you end up with is the periodic eviction of homeless camps in areas that really probably shouldn't have existed in the first place, because
for sure,
I don't think anyone wants to live under a bridge. I think we've talked about this before. I think there are some people who psychologically are just of the... I think you said this one time. They don't want to be a part of society. They can't. They just... And there's always going to be those kind of people. This problem is never going to be solved completely, but I think that there's a huge range of gradations. There's a huge spectrum of kind of like why people are on the street. And I don't know. I feel like I don't know all the answers with that, but I do feel that the direction in which I want to seek for answers is just a more pragmatic direction, because maybe going along with the kind of post-2020 polarization hangover that I'm feeling, and I suppose other people are feeling, I'm not interested in arguing. If a conversation turns into an argument and I realize it's not getting anywhere, I just want to save my energy. I don't feel the need to match other hyperbolic individuals at their own game. I want to walk away.
I agree with that and mostly act the same.
Thanks.
In opposition to that, I think it's necessary to make sure a contrasting viewpoint is vocalized. Whether you vocalize it in a confrontational way that needs to be proven right in the face of someone who thinks differently, like, that becomes an argument.
Exactly.
But, like, some things should not be allowed to be said out loud without you giving an alternative view. Like, you can say it affirmatively and clearly and not in a confrontational way. Like, you said that, I think that's wrong, I think this is true. There's some situations where it's called for to do that and then walk away. Like at our last salon, like, it was a huge part of the conversation that all literature is propaganda.
Well, someone suggested that. I don't think that was the consensus.
It was going to be if I didn't speak up about it. Just the way it became the consensus in a couple different salons that the world is burning and headed for destruction.
Getting worse, yeah.
And the world is generally a really shitty place. That I didn't have the words at any of those moments and the facts to provide an alternative perspective on that. So I kept it to myself.
Yeah.
But because no alternative perspective was proposed, we then proceeded from there as if that was a first step of logic that we were all using.
Yes. Well, I think there's a natural inclination in conversations to emulate the critical mode of discourse that we're exposed to heavily. Maybe we shouldn't do that because we're just aping a way of talking about things. Dude, check out that hawk.
Where?
Or falcon or something.
Oh, where?
He's on the ground. Oh wait, no, never mind. Is that the one that's hopping
fucking
around?
scrub jay.
Oh, it's a scrub jay. Never mind. He just looked extra meaty, and so.
He's standing up with much like machismo
now
right
that I
now.
got the profile view, that's just a scrub jay. Man, had me fooled. I was like, yeah, that bird looks super buff for a second.
He does. Yeah. Scrub jays are very capable animals, and in the vein of the raven spirit.
They're scrappy.
Yeah, they're very scrappy.
Yeah.
And that's the like glorified bum archetype is like the hermit that is self-sufficient and wants to live on his or her own terms.
Yeah.
And does not care about appearances, only about freedom and self-sufficiency.
Yeah, and going back to maybe this idea that art can save the world.
Like does not need you to participate in his choices.
Yeah.
For him to be his fucking thing.
Yeah. Like in the spirit of the Biden-Putin chess match concept, I think that, maybe there are some artistic ways to solve the homelessness crisis. I actually read about this thing where in Oakland, a bunch of homeless people, I think it was instigated by some individual who was not homeless, who came in and started constructing cob houses under an overpass. And they were like very beautiful structures made out of mud brick. Yep. And they had like painted wood trim, and they had like a little community garden, and they had these little huts filled with supplies that people had donated. And there was like certain little rules to this community, like you had to respect it and stuff like that. And it was just kind of like this place of spiritual refuge from the utter pain and chaos of living on the street in the Bay Area. Yeah. And, it's easy to criticize that because you go, well, what is that really doing? You're just, this is a drop in the bucket, But I think there's something important about that as a symbol. And
I think it's very high likelihood that was very important for the guy building the houses.
Yeah.
Like, I would not do what he did. I think it's wrong what he did.
Really?
Why? I think he's a better person than 99% of people who are like advocating for homeless people's rights.
Why is that wrong?
Because I suspect he's doing it for altruistic motives out of no personal profit at all. And all that energy he's spending to make things for someone else is not to make his own life better.
Well,
it's because he thinks the proper mode of being is to help others. And I don't think that's the proper mode of being. But he's a better person than most people who think altruism is the highest moral principle, because he's actually putting action to his convictions.
Interesting.
And so he gets to experience the results and learn from his own experience the extent to which that principle works for his life or not. Other people just say shit and don't do anything about it and try and get rich people to spend their money unwillingly to help a problem without doing anything themselves.
So you said something very contrarian, that the proper motive being is not to help others.
That should not be the highest moral virtue of your existence, no.
Well, I think it's, I don't think you can assume that he's doing that from a, he's,
I can, because that's the primary takeaway everyone's going to take from knowing he did that.
That's not the takeaway I got.
You don't think he did that to help other people?
No, I think he did. But I think you can't really disentangle what you do for yourself from what you do for other people. It's just, it's both. And it always is both. There's never been a person who's ever acted completely altruistically, because even people who wanted to help other people, that's what they want to do, and they do it. And I think that's a great thing. I think there are people in the world who get a personal satisfaction, and it's wonderful, and it's great that there's those kind of people. And it's not creating any danger that there's those kind of people in the world who want to go out and lay down their life for other people. I think that's a good thing.
I think that's disgusting, and
Really?
That's not them asking themselves what they really want from their life.
This is an interesting conversation.
That's exporting the responsibility of actually asking themselves what they want for their own life. They don't have to face the question because they just give their life to other people.
But doing so has a way of manifesting a tremendous amount of value in your own life without you knowing where it came from. Like people who go and volunteer to be part of the Doctors Without Borders paradrop into some remote area and do a bunch of cataract surgery to help the people who are blind there, who don't have access to, like that surgery, to fix their blindness. And I would imagine that those experiences that those people have had are tremendously valuable and have deeply benefited them in other ways of their life. I think that just because you can't see directly how something's going to pay off for you, it's like maybe just that man who made those cob houses senses
I think
a
it's,
direction he wants to go in.
Ideally, yes. And he's way fucking better at building cob houses now.
Yeah.
So that's a direct personal benefit.
And now he's known for doing something, and so the next thing he wants to do, people are going to pay attention to more, because it's going to be like...
Unless it's something selfish. Unless it's something purely for his own benefit. Now he's in a situation where he's only going to get celebrated for what he does if it's perceived to be a completely selfless thing.
I don't think that's true. I think that people... I think this maybe is an aspect of the not giving people enough credit thing. I think that there is a kind of environment where we're suspicious of everyone's motives these days, and that's because that's part of the conspiratorial lens that the media puts on everyone's motives.
Okay, here's what else is wrong with it.
Okay.
Him building the cob houses under the bridges for homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
If he wants to help people, he's using his standard of who needs his help the most as who's the least able to contribute something to anyone around them. I'm gonna take people's inability to function in the world as the standard of whether or not they deserve my help. Shouldn't he be looking for like a struggling student who's immigrated here and going to school and build them a house? Shouldn't he be looking for people who deserve it by merit, not deserve it by their inability to function? Wouldn't that have been a better way to help? And, okay, he's building cob houses. He helps 20 people, and then that turns into, you can extrapolate that and see that probably helping 50 people, and then that probably helps 100 people. Meanwhile, Jeff Bezos just puts Jeff first and only does what he wants to do and helps fucking billions of people. and raises the standards of living for fucking everyone.
I don't have anything against Jeff Bezos, but I think that Amazon has had good and bad effects on the world.
Well, you don't get out of the phenomenon of having good and bad effects on the world around you, but he's helped more people than the Cobb House guy. And the way he did it was by staying selfish.
I don't think that's the way he did it. I think he did it because he had vision. And the way to scale vision in our world is to make money so that it can become self-sustaining, and you don't have to rely on donations. But
yeah, that's how you affect real change in the world.
But you have to start somewhere.
Having capital.
And I think that the Cobb House guy, I could imagine that the vision of having, for instance, just the possibility, the imagination of like homeless people building their own houses out of stuff, outside of having to beg institutions for handouts, is a very empowering thing.
So are you including in this anecdote now that he's teaching hobos how to build cob houses? Because that was not something I understood.
That was part of it. It was implicit. It was a community project where they constructed together things, and they put their efforts towards creating houses that were not like shoddy tarps, tents, and stuff, but they were like these beautiful objects.
And the homeless people were helping build them.
Yes.
Okay. See, I didn't know that part of it. Go on.
Yeah, it was like a vision. It's just, I think that the value of a vision is kind of inherent. You don't really know how things are going to fall out. I think there's a lot of things that have become tremendously profitable, scalable, Amazon-esque hyper objects in the world that have created a bunch of niches, a bunch of opportunity, a bunch of creative destruction, in fact. Everything, like you said, everything's a mixed bag. Most things afflict the world in good and bad ways from a certain perspective, from a certain time scale. But you don't have a good prior knowledge of what that time scale is going to look like when you start doing something, and you can't because, speaking for myself, if I understood the implications of every vision I have, I'd never start. I have to start because I believe that there's something contained within the vision that will not express itself until it has its opportunity to grow and see what it turns into. I think of a vision like a seed. You put it in the ground and you wait to see what happens. The only choice you have is whether you stay with it or not. Mm-hmm. And this connects to my debate.
And he is creating a vision where a homeless population in a city now is associated with something other than fucking mountains of trash and tents.
He's introducing a little bit of grace and beauty into an otherwise squalid existence. Mm-hmm. And that is powerful because just the general idea of that is itself an idea that can replicate and instantiate by its own power other things like that. So I don't know. I think that, if you insist on measuring the use of something, the goodness of something with whether or not it ultimately becomes beneficial to the person who started it, I think that actually it'll work out fine because most visions of sufficient power always create something good if they survive, and that's the test. It's the test of reality.
See, the crucial thing you and I don't know here is this actual guy. And
no, I don't.
And
I'm assuming the best.
So we can only look at the surface anecdote and judge it on those premises. Mm-hmm. So it becomes in favor of my argument if he does this at a detriment to his own livelihood. Then that is morally wrong, and he shouldn't have done that. If it adds to his capability, adds to his value, adds to his attitude of how he feels about people in general, then that's not a sacrifice for other people. That's a net benefit, and that's a morally good thing to do.
You think it's a morally wrong thing to
sacrifice your livelihood for someone else? Yes.
Interesting. But don't you think people have a right to do that?
People have a right to freely act however they want,
Exactly.
unless it's hurting people. But if me giving you my entire paycheck next month because you suddenly need it, and now I am at a point of not being able to pay my rent, I'm at a point of not knowing where my food is coming from, that's immoral.
That's immoral?
Well, because my first moral premise is to exist and to live and to embrace life.
Says you. Which is your right.
That's the only value I'm primarily aware of as actually existing.
I'm just saying, I think that you can't, I don't think that's do you think people have a right to kill themselves? Because I do.
Sure, but it'd be better if they lived and fulfilled their purpose.
I agree. I completely agree. I think it would be great if...
So there's a moral gradation there. It'd be more morally good if they lived instead of deciding to kill themselves.
I think that maybe the word moral is tripping me up because I sort of conceive of the word moral as only being defined with respect to the way your actions affect other people. Like, for instance, if I...
Well, the first person your actions affect is you.
Yeah.
You're the first other person that your effects hit.
I think that the idea of you is in kind of a little special... Did it just get quiet for some reason?
It's the external battery.
Is that still recording?
Yeah.
Okay, it just doesn't look like it's moving, so I was wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
I should make another
clap.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I just think that there's a certain kind of... You are in a special category with regard to your own decisions, and that you you have every right to make decisions that are not good for you. Like, why not? Let people do it. I don't think it's a moral issue.
You don't think it's morally wrong to cut off your own arm?
No.
Just for experiment's sake?
No.
But you're not going to do it,
No,
so you're obviously believing that it's morally better to keep both your arms.
No, I think it's just better. Not morally better, just better. I guess I'm saying morally would be like if I had to feed my family and then I cut off my arm. And well, now I can't do that very well anymore.
Because then someone is affected.
Yeah.
But you are the first someone.
Yes.
You are valuable.
Yes. And part of my value is the ability...
So making yourself less valuable arbitrarily is a moral repugnancy.
Well, I think that actually it's ownership of your own value means the right to throw it away. That's what owning something is. I mean, you have complete domain over your own fucking life, and if you want to fuck it up, I think it's just too...
That is a moral issue, whether you intervene in someone's own actions or not. But it's morally better to pursue health and happiness than it is to work for your own destruction.
So I don't disagree with you. I think that I completely agree with you. I think it's just that I use the word moral in a more slightly restricted scope.
I think it's directly tied to a Christian upbringing where we see morals specifically in dogmatic terms, not in pragmatic, practical, fulfilling our needs terms. Like animals are completely morally perfected because they don't have the realm of value choices and free will. They have to choose perfect morals in terms of doing what's best for them.
Interesting. So I understand what you mean by that now. Yeah, I guess I think again, we're using the word morally different, moral in a different context. I don't think animals are moral beings at all. Don't they?
Because they don't have free will about it.
Well, they don't, they never, because animals, just by every observation, don't have the ability to throw away their own life in the same way that we do. And so therefore they don't have responsibility for it, and it doesn't make sense to judge them. Like, I've never seen an animal willingly just blow its brains out. No.
You would grant that was a disgusting thing if you saw that.
Well, I would just think there was something wrong with the animal.
Yes, something wrong.
If I saw a human, and the human I would think there's something wrong with the human. The same thing, yeah.
So that's right and wrong. That's moral values.
Well, it's harmful or beneficial, but...
Right or wrong.
Well, there's different things, I think, than harmful. No, I don't think it's the same thing at all. I think that one of them...
You don't think that the right is generally more beneficial for everybody than the wrong, which is more harmful?
Yeah, for everyone it is. And that's what moral is like the overlap between your choices and the outcome for other people. But if you're... I guess you can take it to the extreme. Thought experiment. You're the last man on Earth. You're living on an island. Tom Hanks. Everyone else died in a nuclear holocaust. You're the last human being. Well, if you live or die, it's not going to affect anyone else. It's going to affect your future descendants. But I think I'm just somewhat uncomfortable giving up that prerogative in my own life of doing things that are not good for me. And I'm putting that within the realm of moral... I guess I just think of morality as an inherently political, inherently multi-personal, extra-personal thing.
See, what I'm hearing, and you're going to have to immediately respond to it, but what I'm reading into that statement is you want to hold on to the freedom of being able to kill yourself at any given point.
Yes.
And never come to the moral awareness that if it's a moral issue, then you have a responsibility to choose life definitively. And to the extent that you, why would you hold on to the option of maybe destroying yourself tomorrow?
To remind myself that I'm human.
That seems like something you should just decide, so then you can decide higher level complexity decisions after that.
But I'm not insecure in my will to live.
Because you're not admitting that you're making a moral choice to live, and that's what you actually believe, is that it's morally better to fucking live.
Well, yeah,
and
sure.
live more and more and more fully.
We're arguing over the definition of the word moral. I don't think, I know exactly what you're saying, I think, which is basically that there is a kind of inherent goodness into wanting to live, and I agree with you. I just think that there is even more... The freedom is more important than anything.
They coexist in my mind. Obviously, that'd be less good if we didn't have the freedom to make good choices or bad choices. That would take the morality, the moral value out of any good choices we make.
Right.
Because we don't have the ability to make bad choices instead.
Right.
But because we do have the ability to make bad choices or good choices, that makes it very important to clarify the issue on your own terms and then choose the good.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. Yeah.
I don't even know where we went. Onward onto the next thing.
Onward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Fucking words, man. Holy shit.
The point where it stuck in your craw was specifically when I said that one's highest moral purpose is their own needs and their own fulfillment.
Yeah.
That's where you grabbed it and started fighting it.
I just think that I want to leave the door open as wide as possible to what constitutes your own needs and fulfillment. And if that involves sacrificing your whole life for other people, I want people to be able to make that decision. And I'm just going to go okay.
See, it's a foregone conclusion that other people can make whatever fucking decisions they want, and that would be immoral of me to get in the way of that.
Yeah.
If that decision is going to end my life, I'm going to get in the fucking way of that.
Right, of course.
Because I'm fighting for my life.
Of course.
But if they're going to self-terminate, then I'm not going to get in the way of that, providing it's not destroying me or my loved ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, freedom's good. Freedom is good. Even Oregon's state mandated legal suicide measures, that is cool. That makes sense. In Stranger in a Strange Land, the idea of death or life is totally destigmatized to Valentine, the Martian, visiting Earth as a tourist at the beginning of the story.
Valentine, that's a cool name for a Martian.
That's his last name.
Oh, okay.
Maybe Michael Valentine.
Okay.
when people die on Mars, they just become part of the elders, and people don't need form to have conscious volition. And all their elders have had a physical life and then discorporated, quote unquote, and now are part of this bodiless consciousness working on Mars as the elders state of evolution. Like they see, in his understanding, the physical iteration of your experience is just one step, and if at any point it becomes necessary to discorporate, then you discorporate. And okay, that's the physical time limit. I see it's over. I'm choosing to end it instead of having it be ended for me. And now I'm going into the next realm of experience. And so in a few different times in the story, he thinks he has reached his limit of what he can physically handle. So he prepares himself to do a Return of the Jedi like force disappearing act where the Jedi just disappears instead of dying. Are you familiar with any of those scenes?
Yes, I am. Like when Obi-Wan gets slain by Darth.
Yeah, like a few different times in the story in Stranger in a Strange Land, Michael Valentine is getting ready to discorporate because he's like, oh, I can't handle this. Like, my body's can't handle this. Like, I'm going to step out now. And then his Earth friends around him go like, whoa, what the fuck are you doing? What the fuck are you doing? Don't fucking die.
Right.
Don't die. What are you doing?
Right.
And he's like, oh, you, like, that's a bad thing for you guys? Like, I didn't understand that. Tell me more. Or like, I didn't understand that, like, I could actually navigate this without dying. Like, tell me more. And he's not stigmatized about it at all. And all his friends are like freaked out about it. So in that context, like being able to, like, suicide should not be like a criminal offense.
Yeah, I just want to talk about politics in a more humanistic way. I think we need to be talking about myths whenever we're talking about politics. We need to be taking things to an extrapersonal, transpersonal, actually I think it's a better word, transpersonal level when we discuss like the world. Because, you know, individuals, I think a lot of problems come from people feeling the need to formally represent who they are, because you end up losing a lot of information when you do that. It's better to just keep your goals secret, act on them, and that's that. And then, like, when it comes to discussing, like, what should happen, like, you have to start with, like, first, what is happening? Then you're kind of at a point where you're like...
But you're talking about myths, too.
Yeah. And myths are what is happening.
Myths as a way to provide a way forward? Based on what myths we agree on? Yeah,
I'm thinking of, I guess I was thinking about this, sort of relates to the prompt I had with regard to personal mythology.
Yes.
I didn't add it in there, but it's personal mythology as distinct from transpersonal mythology.
Okay.
We're very familiar with what transpersonal mythology is, like, for instance, like the hero in the hero's journey. It's a kind of larger than any one individual heroic representation of what an individual could be or is. Mm-hmm.
And that relates mostly to a personal experience.
Yeah, and then that myth gets instantiated into a higher resolution version within your own self. And I guess I just think that maybe the individual's inner life is like kind of composed, or it's sort of composed is composed of the individual, of the myths that they've instantiated and made personal. And like, I've just been thinking about that a lot because I've been kind of thinking about like writing an autobiography, and I always imagined that I would do that when I was like 80 or something. Like I would sit there, smoke my pipe, and like write my memoirs or something, and be like, what just happened? You know what I mean? Kind of, you know what I mean? And then, like, I'm approaching.
Whoa, what if we, like, tried to write an autobiography of 2020
Yeah.
and what we did
I was going
there?
to take it even further. I was thinking about writing an autobiography that includes my future self. And, like,
Okay.
writing my memoirs before they happened.
Okay.
And I was thinking about that, and I was, like, being very earnest about it. And I don't think I would show this to anyone. This would just be my own personal meditation. I was thinking about that, like, you know, we give a lot of transpersonal myths are allowed to extend into the domain of the future, and in fact, a lot of their power derives from their extension into the future. And there's all kinds of myths about, you know, the return of Christ in the Western civilization, or like the end of the cycle of, like, I think it's called, like, Kali Yuga or something in the Hindu mythology. There's like this, or the Mayans believe, you know, in these cycles, like the transpersonal myths extend in the past and the present and the future, and there are these massive things. And so, but your personal mythology, you know, as
tends not to extend into the future.
because exactly. And so, just writing down a myth for your own life that can extend into the future, I think would just be an interesting exercise. And I mean, and beyond being an exercise, I mean, I think there's a certain truth to it. There's a certain truth to the way that, because, like, it's just a myth, and myths are very, very powerful. Yeah, we don't need to be limited. We have, that's maybe one aspect of the kind of, like, the reductive mode of analysis that we bring to bear habitually on things due to the success of reductivism in creating technology, that we have mistaken the reductive mode of analysis for the only mode of analysis that's available to us. Whereas other cultures of the past, perhaps it did not occur to them that they had to limit.
So we're misunderstanding by doing that the technology of myth making.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
And that practice and my experience is illustrated in my plans to live until I'm 300 years old.
Yeah.
That's beginning to instantiate a myth that includes my future iteration, and adjusting to that future vision now in whatever way is practical and makes my life better.
What is that myth all about? What does that myth mean? The myth of Alex living to 300 years, where does that come from?
Curiosity. I probably feel the same way as most people in wanting to know what happens next and wanting to get as wide a view of what happens next as possible. Also, human achievement. I want to do more than anyone's done before me. And one realm where I think I can do more, it's not in Einstein, it's not in, like, articulating a unified field theory and showing it in math, but it can be in terms of persistence and developing a way of life that thrives over a long term instead of over an 80-year-old term. Like, that's within my skill set to do something that's like a small pool of people who are willing to openly entertain that possibility. So, like, that's something I can contribute, is the experiment of being conscious of that goal.
Dreaming an impossible dream. Seeing what it feels like.
Dreaming an impossible dream. Yeah, I think many men feel the desire to instantiate a previously impossible dream into the world with their own actions. And so that's one realm. Living longer seems like it's interest. There's interest there for me to make the attempt. And it's something I can do better than other people because other people just aren't interested in that issue as much. Like, not in a positive way. Like, most people who are interested in that are just afraid of dying and want to deny the necessity of death as part of life. So that's just trying to get rid of a negative.
Can I have a sip of that water? Thanks. I'm out of coffee.
So there's a myth of just like taking what I see in the world and changing it to be more exciting and by my own terms
Yeah.
than what I saw at the beginning of my life.
Transformation.
Like it'd be a more exciting world if people knew that living till 300 on the nat, like without pills and without uploading your consciousness, people knew they could do that.
And then when you're
that'd be a more exciting
on your
world.
300th birthday,
Yeah.
you're like,
I mean, but if there's an opportunity for like a dramatic, positive, artistic gesture of discorporating, like I've already met the only goal like that matters at that point.
so what do you, okay, so the myth, the archetype behind this 300-year-old life myth is, if I'm understanding correctly, is maybe something to do with transformation. Like having just more time span to manifest transformative things.
Physical reality as an art form.
Yeah.
The physical life as an art piece. And so I want to make it an exciting art piece. I want every factor within it to be under my creative direction, including the years, the year count.
So what is your take on, I think it's like some fucked up Russian author or something. Of course he's Russian. It's like some Russian author who I believe, and I think this is actually true, this is not an urban legend, but he would like, I think maybe, obviously he couldn't have done this too many times for obvious reasons, but he took a revolver, put one bullet in it, spun it, went alone, went into the woods by himself, and then just spun it, held it up to his head, and went click.
Okay.
To see, I guess, how that felt. That's true art, because, I mean, I guess we know about it now, but he wasn't doing this in front of anyone. It was like for him.
Yeah,
that is fucking intense.
He was creating a completely novel experience.
Yes.
Purely for its own, like just to experience it.
His thoughts like, if I live, I'm putting thoughts into his mind now. I'm imagining what he must have been thinking. It's like, if I live, well then I've just had this experience now. This experience is now part of my life, taking this tremendous risk, willingly, consciously facing death. And not blinking. If I live, I have that experience, and if I don't, I won't be around to not have it. So that's crazy. I think that's a preeminent example of a kind of acting on a personal mythology, which, pretty extreme example of it. But why the fuck would someone do that without a powerful mythology making them do it?
And so what's your mythology like in terms of the future too?
I haven't given it that much thought. I wasn't prepared to answer. I thought of more just the concept in kind of general terms of just like transpersonal versus personal myths. That's a really good question, and I'm actively thinking about it. This just occurred to me like 2 days ago.
Like it's in your aesthetic mythology to live on a ship and do pirate coding.
Yeah. That's kind of a, although
independence and self-sufficiency is part of your mythology.
Well, it's kind of weird because there's a kind of tension between my idea of independence and my desire to deeply, deeply, deeply get mixed up with the world. I don't want to, it's like, I almost think of independence as like a starting point for being able to get really mixed up with the world without getting sort of like pigeonholed into a particular local minimum of existence.
Well, this is again where my idea of morality is has a point going for it, is because you stand to be of maximum benefit to the world and you're mixing with it.
Yeah.
If you're maximally independent.
Exactly.
And that requires a profound selfishness of holding your own life as the first value from which all other values have to be subsequent to that first one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe what we're getting down to is that we don't know how to talk about selfishness.
I think we know how to feel about it. I don't think we're allowed to talk about it because selfishness has been made a taboo.
Yeah, because we don't know how to talk about it in a way that is feels like we're getting anywhere. The language is mixed up with ideas of Christian moralism, at least in our own. That's actually now that I'm thinking about it, I think that's probably that's one of my central personal myths, is like a kind of...
You want to rescue the battery from
the sunlight? Yeah, sure.
The sun?
Oh wow, that's really hot. Yeah, I think that like...
Your personal mythology has original sin in it, or has your response?
Its premise, is a kind of like...
part of your mythology is a response to this imposition
yes,
of original sin.
Yes, I think that the idea of original sin is the primary mythological antagonism.
I agree with that.
In my
Same.
internal mythology, and I think that I think that that's like the worthiest enemy to heroically struggle against.
Yes.
Because
I think that's one of the reasons we're able to collaborate.
I think so too. Yeah, it's worth articulating. Like I think that I at some point became like just really clearly aware of how much someone was stealing my pocket watch and selling it back to me, so to speak. Where I just
by preaching original sin to you?
Yeah, by going like, you humans are fundamentally bad, evil, and need of penitence.
I will accept your tithe now.
Exactly. And it's a means of control. And it's a means of control where people go, like, it's like stealing something from you and selling it back to you. And the easiest way to get away with stealing something and selling it back to them is to make sure the person never realizes it was theirs to begin with, and so they don't miss it when you stole it.
That's right.
And I was raised, at least anyways, in the kind of like, standard evangelical church environment, whatever, to be like, oh man, if I just am a good person eventually someday, then I guess I did the right thing. Like, and I'm starting from in the hole. My entire existence is probationary, and my main prerogative in life is to be humble and dig myself out of this. Oh man, I'm like, humans, we're so fucked up.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Like, oh, we're like, we're just trying to we're struggling against this bestial nature. I mean, you could even conceive of it in non-religious terms if you want to transpose this idea into the idea that everyone's just, some kind of like violent animal inside of them, and like, we gotta tame the monkey, like, be civilized. It's the same exact thought pattern of like, you're fallen, be holy, you're an animal, be civilized. Like, it's the same exact thing that just keeps cropping up. And my personal mythology is just like, no, I'm calling that bluff.
Yes.
I don't need, like, if I look deep within myself, I find that I am fundamentally a good person. I'm fundamentally good. This is like some hippie bullshit or whatever, but like, I'm like a shining being of light and potential and inspiration and vision, and I'm connected to the whole universe. I'm an expression of this world. I don't want to harm anyone. Like, I'm channeling Charlie Chapman's famous speech now, like, that makes me fucking tear up every time I listen to that. Beautiful articulation of like the fact that humans are not inherently bad. And like, it's that idea, I think, is the central antagonism for me, that I just go like, I want to test that and see how much trouble I could potentially get in and not prove myself wrong. So I don't know. I think like I don't see other animals doubting themselves, feeling shitty about themselves.
Totally.
You know what I mean? I don't see.
Totally.
Yeah, this is a particularly human conceit that we have, that we're so different than the rest of everything else, that we're fundamentally flawed, and it's just a kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy that ends up, it's just a shitty myth.